The rain lashed against the city that night. Daniel narrowed his eyes as he looked at the mailbox. Since Alice's death 10 years ago, he never expected anything. But there it was, a letter, with his name written in handwriting he could never forget. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. The yellowed paper smelled of the past, and the words inside felt like a whisper from beyond. For Daniel, with love, Alice. His heart pounded. This made no sense. Alice was dead. He saw the body, buried it, mourned. Then, how? He looked around the empty street, the silence broken only by distant thunder. Was someone playing a cruel joke on him? Or was there something he never knew? The truth was hidden between the lines, and Daniel was about to discover that the past never truly stays silent. It merely waits for the right moment to echo back. Daniel was no longer the man he used to be. Alice's death hadn't just turned him into a widower. It had made him a ghost inside his own body. The apartment he lived in mirrored his mind. Stacks of untouched books, cold coffee cups scattered around, curtains always shut. Time there didn't move forward. It simply repeated itself. He had given up on writing, on life, on everything. But that letter, that simple piece of paper, sliced through his apathy like a blade. He picked up the envelope again, felt the texture of the paper between his fingers, read and reread every word, the handwriting, the tone. Everything was exactly how Alice would have written it. But how was that possible? He remembered the last time he saw her, the accident, the deafening sound of metal twisting. And yet, here she was, somehow, coming back to him. Doubt gnawed at him. He needed answers, but the first question still echoed in his mind. Was it real, or was he losing his mind? The next morning, another letter. Same paper, same handwriting, but this time something different. Do you really remember what happened that night, Daniel? He gripped the paper tightly. A chill ran down his spine. That question cut through him like a cold blade. Of course he remembered. He was driving, it was raining, Alice was beside him. The sound of tires skidding on the wet road. The impact, the blood, the silence. But what if his memory was wrong? He decided to search for answers. He looked up old records, rummaged through forgotten boxes, called old acquaintances. But the pieces didn't fit. Some people seemed to recall details he had no memory of. The letters kept coming, leading him like a dark puzzle, small fragments of a truth he didn't want to see, until a name appeared, a place, an abandoned asylum, and with it, a revelation that would change everything. The asylum was miles away from the city, isolated, surrounded by trees that seemed to hide ancient secrets. Daniel hesitated in front of the rusted gate. Something inside him screamed for him to leave, but he knew this was the only way to find answers. With a trembling flashlight in hand, he stepped inside. The smell of mold and abandonment filled his senses. The hallways were long, the walls covered in graffiti and old records. Every step echoed in the suffocating silence. Then he heard it, a voice, faint, distant, calling his name. He followed the sound, passing through broken doors and rooms forgotten by time, until he reached an old patient's chamber. There in the center, a woman with disheveled hair sat in a wheelchair, staring at him. You took long enough, Daniel. His heart stopped. That woman, she looked like Alice, but her eyes, empty and distant, carried something beyond recognition. Who was she, and how did she know his name? Daniel felt the truth approaching, and with it, the fear of discovering what really happened that fateful night. Daniel took a hesitant step forward. The woman tilted her head, as if studying his reactions. You don't remember, do you? Her voice was soft, yet filled with something terrifying. He wanted to say yes, that he remembered, but the truth was different. There were gaps, shadows in his mind that he had never been able to fill. The woman extended her hand and gave him something small, a brooch, identical to the one Alice always wore. The same brooch that, according to his memory, had been destroyed in the accident. His memories began to warp. What if he had been wrong all along? What if Alice had never died? And what if the real reason she disappeared was him? The ground seemed to vanish beneath him. Daniel tried to deny it, tried to run from the truth, but the evidence was there. He hadn't just forgotten, he had erased it. His own brain, in a desperate act, had buried reality. Alice hadn't died in the accident. She survived, but was brought to this place. And he allowed it. The letters, they were from her. A silent scream trying to wake him from the lie he had created. Daniel fell to his knees, despair washing over him. How could he have lived so long without remembering? How could he have forgotten someone he loved? And now, what would he do? What? One final letter was delivered to him that night. In it, Alice had written only one thing. You can live in the illusion or accept the truth. The choice is yours. Daniel looked at the woman in front of him. Her eyes now held a painful understanding. He had to decide. The screen fades to black. The echo of the past never disappears. It only waits to be heard.